Hello everybody, welcome back, doing some magic.
Magic!
Yes, indeed. So, modern today, and I'm playing a deck that I'm going to call Graveyard Gargoyle, because it's based around filling your opponent's graveyard, and then playing out these Vantress gargoyles, which are undercosted, but we'll get there. So, a lot of ones and a lot of twos in this deck. Very, very inexpensive in terms of mana cost, and that's about it. Because 4 Thoughtseize. So, yeah, obviously, if you want to fill your opponent's graveyard, that's a pretty good one to do it with. Take their best thing.
You just take their best card, put it in the graveyard.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Inquisition of Kozlak, same idea, but for a mana cost 3 or less. You should know what these cards do by now, but I'll go over them anyway.
Pretty modern staple.
Yeah. Fatal Push, kill a 2-drop or a 4-drop if you have Revolt. Thought Scour, so this is one of the better cards in this deck because you actually get to mill your opponent for 2, which helps you towards these 2 cards, but also gives you card draw, which
also
this deck
just cycles itself, so.
Yeah, so instant speed, pretty good, generally speaking. Then Vicious Rumors, one of basically the reasons I wanted to play this deck anyway, because this card's just sort of cool. It's like a little one-sided Smallpox without the sacrifice. So it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into their graveyard, and you gain 1 life. So a bunch of like fairly innocuous abilities, but when you're trying to fill your opponent's graveyard, that does double duty and gives you a little life bonus as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so then to capitalize on all of these fill your opponent's graveyard cards, we have Jace's Phantasm, a 1-mana, 1/1 flyer that gets +4/+4 as long as an opponent has 10 or more cards in their graveyard, which is fairly easy to get to.
Yes. So while this deck is like, you could think it's like milling, but since you're just trying to hit a certain number and not like mill them out, you don't play the actual mill cards.
Which is exactly why there's no like glimpse or any of those, because like Tome Scour, yes, you can get like mill their 5 and probably get these into attack mode, but that's all that card does.
Yes.
And you're probably not winning that way, so yeah. So that's Jace's Phantasm. Then we have Vantress Gargoyle, another reason, namesake of the deck. 5/4 flying for 2 mana. It can't attack, or unless the defending player has 7 or more cards in their graveyard. So a little less of a cost than Jace's Phantasm, but it does have a slight downside in the fact that it can't block unless you have 4 or more cards in your hand. So it doesn't always happen to be able to block with him, but you have enough kill spells and other things that you don't really want to be blocking anyways. You'd rather be attacking.
You just have these giant 5-power flyers, and that's kind of the goal.
And if you can't get him into attack mode early, it is worth running it out early because he can also tap to make each player put the top card of their library into their graveyard. So he can sort of work his way up to being able to attack without any help, which is neat. Yeah, and then we have 3 Smallpox, so each player loses a life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, then sacrifices a land. So that's like 3 things that you fill your opponent's graveyard with for 1 card.
Yes.
Pretty good.
And you'll always want to play this before you play your Phantasm or Gargoyle, because don't want to just lose it for free.
Yeah. I mean, you can if you absolutely have to, like if your opponent has 1 giant thing that you need to get rid of stat, but oftentimes, yeah, you want to pox before you throw out your creatures. Then we have 2 cast downs. Honestly, this could have been a Doomblade or Go for the Throat, but we had these like foil full art
the
ones,
fancy cast downs.
So they're cast downs now. Yeah, and 3 copies of Snapcaster Mage, so tons of spells in this deck. All very cheap spells. Snapcaster Mage just lets you rebuy those, and you don't really care about the size of your graveyard so much. So it doesn't really matter that it's emptying your graveyard because you want to fill your opponent's. And then we have 4 copies of Davriel, Rogue Shadow Mage. So this is another sort of win con. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 1 or fewer cards in their hand, Davriel deals 2 damage to them, which in a deck that's trying to empty your opponent's hand and quickly, that's a pretty decent ability.
Pretty likely to happen with 8, 12 1-drops that make them discard a card.
Yes. And of course Davriel has activated ability, -1, target player discards a card. So it can sort of help towards that. Yeah, so those are the spells. Lands are pretty straightforward, but I'll go over them anyway. 4 polluted deltas, 3 watery graves, 2 drowned catacombs. We have a few fun of lands here in the form of Sunken Ruins, Nephalia Drown Yard. I just threw that in because it mills. And
Yeah, like if you just need those last few cards to get them to 10, then you do have the Drown Yard.
Seems reasonable. River of Tears, that's just because it's fun. It's fun to use. You have to be careful with when you tap it. And then 3 copies of Creeping Tar Pit, which is sort of another low-key win condition, but if you're emptying your opponent's hand and you're getting into top deck mode, it's sort of nice to have an unblockable 3 power guy that you can just send in if you got nothing better to do. And then 3 swamps and 2 islands. And that is Graveyard Gargoyle.
Doo-doo-doo-doo.